with an update on the performance of our partnership with Bermuda under the Anguilla brand, which commenced operations in December of 2025, and to report on the measurable economic outcomes arising from this strategic initiative. Madam Speaker, this partnership is about more than simply operating flights. Through the Anguilla brand, Anguilla has gained increased visibility, enhanced destination marketing, and stronger brand recognition in key international markets. Every Anguilla aircraft, advertisements on booking platforms, as well as promotional campaigns, serve as an extension of Anguilla's tourism presence abroad and strengthens awareness of our island as a premier destination. When this government took the decision to support this initiative, we did so with a clear objective: to strengthen air connectivity to our primary tourism source markets, stimulate new visitor demand, and generate tangible economic benefit for the people of Anguilla. At the time, Madam Speaker, questions were raised regarding the prudence of the arrangement, the rationale for the limited government support, and the potential financial exposure to the taxpayers. Madam Speaker, those were legitimate questions. However, this government approached the matter not emotionally, not politically, but strategically and analytically. Today, the evidence demonstrates that that decision was not only justified, it was successful. Between December 2025 and April 2026, Anguilla transported approximately 7,900 passengers through its Anguilla services. Independent analysis estimates that these flights generated approximately 11.5 million US dollars in direct economic value to Anguilla over that period. Madam Speaker, for the benefit of the listening public as well as this honorable House, it is important to explain how these economic impact figures are calculated. The ministry's assessment is based on internationally accepted tourism economic modeling and uses measurable visitor data, which includes the number of inbound passengers traveling to Anguilla, the average length of stay for visitors on each route, and the estimated average daily spend for each visitor within the Anguillan economy. For example, the analysis uses an average daily visitor expenditure of approximately 324 US dollars per person, not accounting for accommodation, combined with average stays ranging between 7 and 9 days, depending on the originating market. Therefore, when a passenger arrives on a direct Anguilla flight and stays in Anguilla for a week or more, the assessment calculates the cumulative economic activity generated through accommodations, restaurants, transportation, excursions, retail purchases, entertainment, and other tourism-related spending. In addition, the analysis also factors in direct government-related revenues generated through passenger taxes, airport development fees, security charges. So, Madam Speaker, the US $11.5 million figure is not just an arbitrary estimate or a political talking point. It is derived from actual passenger volumes, established tourism spending metrics, and recognized economic methodology used throughout the entire tourism industry. Madam Speaker, that figure reflects real visitor spending in our hotels, villas, restaurants, taxis, shops, excursions, and small businesses throughout the island. The monthly economic impact grew consistently month over month as the routes matured. In December 2025, the economic impact was approximately 1.04 million US dollars. In January of 2026, 2.34 million US dollars. In February 2026, 2.45 million US dollars. In March of 2026, 2.77 million US dollars. And in April of 2026, 2.9 million US dollars. This steady month-over-month growth is particularly important because it demonstrates that the roots were not short-lived and a promotional spike, but rather a maturing and strengthening airlift product. Madam Speaker, one of the key concerns previously raised in this Honorable House was whether the Anguilla service would merely redistribute existing passengers from other airlines rather than create new tourism demand. The data now answers that question conclusively. Commercial analysis indicates that approximately 80% of the Anguilla passengers represented newly stimulated demand rather than diverted traffic from existing carriers. In other words, Madam Speaker, the flights expanded Anguilla's market. They brought new visitors to Anguilla. And additionally, while airfares in affected markets declined by approximately 15.8%, traffic from Boston, New York, and Washington markets increased by over 140%. Madam Speaker, this government made it clear from the outset that any support arrangement would be limited, targeted, specific, and time-bound. That position has not changed. Prior to launch, I informed this Honorable House that the government support was designed only to assist in establishing strategically important routes during the initial winter season and that there was no open-ended obligation beyond April of 2026. I also advise that that arrangement had to be evaluated not simply by cost, but also by return on investment as well as national economic impact. Madam Speaker, the results now validate the assessment. Against the level of marketing and risk-sharing support provided, the return to the Anguillan economy has been many multiple times greater. This is precisely the type of strategic public investment governments around the world need to undertake in order to stimulate economic growth, strengthen tourism competitiveness, and support national development. Importantly, this government did not enter into this arrangement blindly. We acted based on measurable tourism data, route economics, market analysis, and projected visitor expenditure models. Madam Speaker, the strongest performing routes have been Boston and Newark, which align directly with Anguilla's high-value northeastern US visitor base. These routes generated the highest returns because visitors from these markets tend to stay longer and tend to spend more. The success of these routes has now positioned Anguilla to move beyond simply route preservation, but into route expansion. Based on the ministry's assessment, we would recommend continuation of the Anguilla services for winter of 2026, extension into summer of 2027, increased frequencies on the Boston and Newark routes. And Madam Speaker, I can already say that we're already in discussions with Bermuda on all of these, but there's also some good news that I will deliver to this Honorable House later on. Madam Speaker, I also wish to address directly the broader policy issue raised previously regarding whether this arrangement would create a precedent for indiscriminate airline subsidies. The answer simply remains as no. As stated previously in this House, the Anguilla arrangement was treated as a unique strategic case due to the importance of direct connectivity to Anguilla's core tourism markets. This government evaluates every airlift opportunity individually based on projected economic return, national tourism priorities, and long-term sustainability. We will not support routes that do not demonstrate strategic value to Anguilla. We will not enter into reckless or open-ended commitments. And we will continue to protect the negotiating position of the government and the interests of the people of Anguilla. Madam Speaker, what this experience demonstrates is something very important. When government acts strategically, pragmatically, and based on evidence, the country benefits. Hotels benefit, restaurants benefit, taxi operators benefit, villa owners benefit, workers benefit, small businesses benefit, government revenues benefit, and ultimately, Madam Speaker, Anguilla benefits. This government remains committed to strengthening Anguilla's connectivity, expanding economic opportunity, and positioning our island competitively within the regional tourism market. The Anguillier Initiative has now moved beyond a concept. It has become a proven contributor to Anguilla's economic growth and tourism resilience. Madam Speaker, the evidence is clear. The results are measurable, and the strategy is working. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Pursuant to Standing Orders 27.5, are there any questions to be put to the Minister in respect of the statement? If there are no questions, before the clerk calls the order paper, I do propose for efficiency when we get to other business. I'm going to propose, just so the movers are prepared, that we deal with the first readings first, and then we deal with the more substantive piece of legislation thereafter. Would that be favorable for the members, just for efficiency? Okay, thank you. You may proceed.
Papers, none. Reports from committees, none. Petitions, none. Government notices, none. Private members' notices, none. Motions, none. Personal explanations, none. Other business, government business. A bill for Sports Act 2026, first reading.
I invite the mover to present the bill.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise to move that a bill entitled Sports Act 2026 be read a first time.
Is there a seconder?
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Sports Act 2026 be read a first time. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a first time and tabled.
An act to provide a framework for the governance, coordination, and development of organized sport in Anguilla, to establish the Anguilla Sports Council, to declare boat racing as a national sport, to provide for the recognition of sports organizations and community sports contributors, to provide for authorized absence from work for employees selected to represent Anguillan sport, to provide for matters relating to the sports fund, and for connected purposes.
Thank you. You may proceed.
A bill for Prison Amendment Act 2026, first reading.
I invite the Honourable Attorney General to present the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning, honourable members and the public. I beg your leave to lay the motion to move a bill for the Prison Amendments Act 2026 to be read for a first time, please.
Is there a seconder?
Good morning, Madam Speaker. I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled Prison Amendment Act 2026 be read a first time. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Order that the bill be read a first time and tabled.
Prison Amendment Act 2026.
At this time, I wish to recognize that we do have the Deputy Chairman of the Financial Services Commission in the gallery. Welcome to the House today, and I recognize that there's a piece of legislation that you may be able to assist the members in respect of. Okay, I invite the mover of this bill to present.
Thank you. Good morning to you, Madam Speaker. Good morning to the members of this honorable House and the listening and viewing audience. Madam Speaker, I move that a bill shortly entitled the Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Amendment Act 2026 be read a second time.
Is there a seconder?
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
Thank you. I invite the member to outline the objects and reasons.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, may I be permitted to make a brief statement in relation to the bill, which would equate to the objects and reasons?
Sure.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise to move the second reading of the Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Amendment Bill 2026. The bill sits within a much wider and very important policy context for Anguilla. It concerns our reputation as a jurisdiction, our relationship with the United Kingdom, our obligations in the global fight against illicit finance, and the balance we must always strike between transparency, privacy, competitiveness, and the rule of law. Madam Speaker, for some years now, the United Kingdom has been pressing the overseas territories to move toward greater transparency in relation to beneficial ownership information. The policy objective has been clear: to make it harder for persons to hide behind companies and legal structures for the purposes of money laundering, terrorist financing, tax evasion, corruption, sanctions evasion, and other forms of financial crime. That pressure did not arise in isolation. It forms part of a wider global movement. The Financial Action Task Force, the European Union, the United Kingdom, and other international standard setters have all placed increasing emphasis on beneficial ownership transparency. The question is no longer whether jurisdictions must know who ultimately owns and controls companies. The question is how that information is collected, verified, protected, and accessed. Anguilla has already taken important steps in this regard. In 2022, this legislature enacted the Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Act. That act established the legal framework for the Commercial Registry electronic system, including the Beneficial Ownership Register. At present, access to that information is available to competent authorities. The amendments now before this House move Anguilla into the next stage, a legitimate interest access framework. Madam Speaker, it is important to explain why that approach matters. The United Kingdom has over time encouraged the overseas territories to introduce publicly accessible registers of beneficial ownership. However, the legal and policy landscape changed significantly following the 2022 judgment of the Court of Justice of the European Union. In that judgment, the court found that unrestricted public access to beneficial ownership information could amount to a disproportionate interference with fundamental privacy rights. That decision did not remove the need for transparency, but it did reinforce the need for proportionality. It reminded jurisdictions that the fight against financial crime must be pursued within the boundaries of privacy, due process, personal security, and lawful administration. That is the space in which Anguilla now acts. Madam Speaker, Anguilla is not refusing transparency. Anguilla is not stepping away from its international obligations. But Anguilla is also not throwing open private information to the world without structure or safeguard. We are choosing a more careful, more defensible path, one which has also been pursued by other overseas territories. This bill introduces a legitimate interest model. Under this model, beneficial ownership information may be accessed by persons who can demonstrate that they have a genuine and lawful basis for doing so. Access is not automatic. It is not for general curiosity. It is not for speculation. It is access for a proper purpose within a regulated framework. The bill therefore makes several important amendments to the Principal Act. First, it introduces a definition of legitimate interest. This provides the legal foundation for the access framework and allows the detailed criteria to be prescribed. The purpose is to ensure that persons seeking access must meet objective requirements before beneficial ownership information can be inspected. Second, the bill amends the access provisions of the Act. It removes the unused provision for public access and replaces it with access by persons whom the Financial Services Commission determines to have a legitimate interest. This is a significant policy choice. It means that Anguilla will permit access where the request is justified, but not where the request is unsupported, vague, or improper. In practice, this framework may allow applications from persons such as investigative journalists, bona fide academic researchers, civil society organizations, and persons engaged in relevant due diligence, where the request is connected to the prevention, detection, investigation, or prosecution of financial crime. But, Madam Speaker, the key point is this: the applicant must demonstrate the legitimate interest. It is not presumed. Third, the bill strengthens the process for applying to prohibit disclosure of beneficial ownership information. Where a registrable person believes that disclosure would expose them to serious risk, an application may be made to the Commission. Importantly, the bill extends this protection beyond the registrable person alone. It also recognizes risk to individuals living in the same household. Madam Speaker, this is not a minor point. Beneficial ownership transparency deals with information about real people. In certain circumstances, disclosure could expose not only a beneficial owner, but family members or others in the household to blackmail, intimidation, kidnapping, violence, or other serious harm. A responsible legal framework must account for that. The bill therefore requires applications for non-disclosure to be supported by evidence. So the protection is not automatic. It is not a loophole. It is an evidence-based safeguard. Fourth, the bill provides that while an application to prohibit disclosure is pending, the information that is subject to that application must not be disclosed. This is important because the protection would be meaningless if information could be released before the application is determined. Protection must be available where genuine risk exists, but it cannot become a shield where the facts no longer justify it. Fifth, the bill closes a practical gap in the beneficial ownership framework. Where an Anguilla company has no registrable beneficial owner, the company will now be required to identify its senior managing official as the contact person and provide the prescribed information in relation to that individual. This ensures that the register remains complete and that there is always a responsible person identified in connection with the company. Madam Speaker, taken together, these amendments do three things. They allow appropriate access to beneficial ownership information. They strengthen safeguards for persons who may be at serious risk, and they improve the completeness and credibility of Anguilla's beneficial ownership register. That is the balance that Anguilla must strike. We are a small jurisdiction, but we operate in a global environment. We cannot ignore international standards. We cannot ignore the expectations of the United Kingdom. We cannot ignore the reality that financial crime damages economies, weakens institutions, and undermines public trust. But equally, Madam Speaker, we must not ignore our own economic interests. We must not ignore privacy. We must not ignore constitutional rights. We must not ignore the fact that Anguilla's competitiveness depends not only on being transparent, but on being fair, predictable, and properly regulated. The path before us is therefore not one of blind compliance, nor one of resistance. It is one of responsible governance. This bill says that Anguilla will continue to meet its obligations. It says that we will stand with the international community in the fight against illicit finance. It says that we will modernize our systems and strengthen our laws. But it also says that we will do so in a way that is proportionate, in a way that protects persons at genuine risk, in a way that preserves confidence in our jurisdiction, and in a way that reflects the maturity of this House and this government. Madam Speaker, small states are often asked to move quickly in response to global pressure, but we must also move wisely. The responsibility of leadership is not simply to say yes to every demand. It is to shape the response in a way that protects the territory, honors the law, and serves the public interest. And that is what this bill seeks to do. It is measured, it is careful, it is necessary, and it places Anguilla on a stronger footing. Madam Speaker, I wish to acknowledge the work of the Financial Services Commission, the Attorney General's Chambers, the Ministry of Finance, and the stakeholders who participated in the consultation process. Their work has assisted in shaping a framework that is practical, defensible, and aligned with the direction of travel among other overseas territories. And Madam Speaker, the amendments before this House strengthen our beneficial ownership regime. They support Anguilla's continued engagement with the United Kingdom. They protect our reputation as a responsible financial services jurisdiction. And they remind the world that Anguilla will do its part, but we will do it with balance, with care, and with confidence. I commend the Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Amendment Bill 2026 to this Honorable House. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The floor is now open for debate in respect of the bill for Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Amendment Act 2026. Does anyone wish to speak? Does any member wish to speak in respect of the bill that's on the floor? Hearing no contributions, does the mover wish to make any final statements in respect of the bill?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to thank the members of the Honorable House for their support. As they say, silence is acquiescence. I have no further comments on this bill. Thank you.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled A Bill for Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Amendment Act 2026 be read a second time and committed. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a second time and commit.
An act to amend the Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Act.
I invite a mover to move that this House do resolve itself into committee to consider the bill clause by clause. Mover.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hereby request that this Honorable House move to committee.
Seconder.
Madam Speaker, I rise a second.
It has been moved and seconded that this Honorable House do resolve itself into committee. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The House is now in committee. I call upon the clerk.
Clauses 1 through 12.
I put the question that clauses 1 through 12 do stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Clause 1 through 12 stands part of the bill. I put the question that the title and the enacting clause stands part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Honorable members, it has been completed in committee stage and this House now resumes its sitting.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I beg to report that the bill entitled the Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Amendment Act has passed through committee without amendment and is ready for its third reading.
A bill for Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Amendment Act 2026, third reading.
I invite the mover.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled the Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Amendment Act 2026 be read a third time.
Seconder.
Madam Speaker, I rise to second.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill shortly entitled the Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Amendment Act 2026 be read a third time and passed. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I call upon the clerk to read the bill a third time.
An act to amend the Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Act.
Order that the bill be now passed and the title declared to be Commercial Registry and Beneficial Ownership Registration System Amendment Act 2026. Thank you, honorable members, for your contributions, and the honorable Premier.
Private members' bills, none. Private bills, none.
Honorable members, prior to this House convening this morning, it has come to the Speaker's attention that there are some matters that require some housekeeping as it relates to the Attorney General and the members. And I'm going to propose at this stage that the House stands down for a few hours today just to allow those matters to be completed before we proceed with the orders of the day. I recognize that the government has other business at 2 p.m. And I'm wondering if you would be minded to come back at 4 p.m. to complete your matters, or at 3 p.m. Would you be amenable to resuming our sitting at 4:30 p.m.? I invite a mover to move that this House stands down until 4:30 p.m. to complete the orders of the day.
Madam Speaker, I rise to move that the House stand down until 4:30 today before we continue with the other orders.
Is there a seconder?
I rise to second, Madam Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that this honorable House shall stand down to complete the matters of the House at 4:30 this afternoon. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The House shall resume at 4:30 this afternoon. Thank you, members.